All right, 2020 Teacher of the Year. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
And when I was watching your video, you said to the teachers, know your why. And I loved that. What is your why?
I mean, the why is always the kid in every single seat, and the unique struggles that they are up against. And as an English teacher, I have the luxury of being able to work with their writing and seeing their personal stories and seeing those larger struggles. And also realizing that they're up against systems of injustice that they've inherited, and they don't always understand these systems. They just know they've been brutalized by them. And they know there's people who protect the status quo, that support these systems. So it's easy for students like that to feel alienated, to feel attacked. And we talk about justice, but these kids also know that justice isn't equal for everyone. That if you have more money, you get a different kind of justice than if you're poor. You have a different kind of justice if you're white versus you're black versus you're an immigrant. And so my why is looking at those kids, and in education, everything is relationships first. They have to know you care about them and value them before they care about you and what you have to offer. And after that relationship is established, then we move forward together on what is meaningful and relevant to them. So my why is every single kid, but it's also helping empower them to overcome those systems that they've inherited so that they can be the change. At this point in my career, I've got too much privilege and too much of a platform to be silent. I believe if you're silent in times of injustice, you're complicit. And our students are watching us. And they're looking for people who will stand up for them, who will stand side by side for them. So my why is, being the best possible human I can be, which means you're always evolving. And that's helping those kids to be the best possible humans they can be. But the bigger why with all of that is, we live in a world, in a country that can often dehumanize us. And it's to make our systems more humane so that we're not just working for the dollar, we're working for people. My why is to create a more humane society and to empower our kids to lead the way.
And I think it's interesting. What led you to teaching? Was that kind of just one of those preordained? You mentioned when we were talking, your mom was a teacher?
Yes. So my mom's a teacher. She's a nursing teacher, instructor, and she was also a nurse practitioner for a long time. I'm surprised I'm a teacher in some ways. Yeah. Yes, I am. So when I started off at Bellarmine, I started off as international business. And then I realized that, I am not passionate about this work. I wasn't passionate about, going through those courses. And what I gravitated towards was philosophy, was psychology, was English, was theology. And wrestling with those bigger questions, right, and understand what makes us us, and really just getting into the human condition.
So when did you pivot and go teaching?
It was a windy road. So after I graduated from Bellarmine, I was lined up to work full-time at an interfaith publishing company called Fons Vitae. But then the Iraq War started. And they're an interfaith publishing company, and they publish Islamic works and Sufi work, along with Christian works and Buddhism and everything, right? And I learned so much from different cultures there through that interfaith dialogue. But when that war started, funding for my job stopped. So I went and got a master's degree in English. And I was waiting tables at the time. And then I decided to enter the business world after my master's degree in English. Which was basically, I was, a salesperson with the promise of big money. And I had nightmares every single night. And my nightmares were I was using any kind of knowledge and wisdom and skills that I gathered in my schooling and in my life, and I turned it towards making profit. And it was making me a monster.
Wow.
And my friends did an intervention on me. I got home one night, and I had a roommate. And the few of them were there, and they were just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, you hate this job. This is nothing you stand for. And I was waiting tables before this, right? And with a master's degree in English and a bachelor's degree in English and psychology, there weren't a whole lot of job prospects out there that I could find. And this was something that promised, the American dream. And I was like, you're right. And so the next day I signed up to enter the Master's in Teaching class at U of L, that program. And I started my student teaching. And once I started teaching, my dreams changed literally into changing the world through thesis statements. And so through teaching, you realize, well, even just living, but especially for me through teaching, it's been the best education ever. And what I've realized, there's so many kinds of wealth. In our country, we worship monetary wealth, but there's cultural wealth. You know, there's wealth in wisdom. There's communal wealth. There's wealth in the dialogues that we share, and we sacrifice so much for the dollar.
But that's amazing, though, that your friend said, this is not you. Then there was this awakening, and now you feel like you're in the right place, the right spot?
Absolutely. I mean, in the classroom is where I feel home, where I feel welcomed, where I feel I'm challenged to be my best every single day, and I can offer the best parts of myself and only the best parts of myself to my students. And they are so vulnerable, you know, and so generous with their vulnerability and their gifts and their stories. And so it's important for me to also mirror that. So.
You know, you said home, and what I loved about the video that I saw that you did, I mean, you make your classroom a home.
Yeah.
You said, meet these students where they are. It's not my classroom, it's our classroom, it's our home. And that's how you view it, and boy, not every teacher does that.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the reasons school is so cool, and a way I consider a great equalizer in our democracy, is that kids grow up learning to play together, learning to, you know, everything in school. You have a great diverse group. We play together, we fight together, we learn together, you know, and we laugh together, we get in trouble together, we struggle together, you know, all of it. And so these students, they're free a lot of the stereotypes that older generations can fall into because they've grown up together. And so they don't see each other through a lens of a stereotype. They see names, identities, people. You know, they see Malcolm, they see Abdi, they see Naomi, they see Jesus. You know, and that's so empowering. And so these kids, what I find, are quick to make homes for each other. That if they're given a place, and we're like, we can talk about anything, you know, and your name is sacred, and your lives are sacred, and there's not just one teacher, there's not just one sage on the stage in here. We've got 30 teachers in here, because we've all got life experience, we've all got wisdom. Then all of a sudden, they're called to bring their whole selves, their authentic selves, and stand up for their identities and process things, and the empathy that happens there and the connections that happen there, where you've got 15 different cultures in a classroom connecting with each other and not understanding what the adults are doing.
Let me ask you, because people go, English teacher, and then I look at social justice, I look at all the different projects that you all have done, and people might not think of that when they think of an English teacher, but that's what I really love about it. It's out of the box. It's just thinking of things in a very different way. So how did you get the connection, because you're so known for social justice, with your kids? Where did that come from? I saw about 4 years ago that you all did the cultural dialogues. Was that part of the impetus of what started all of it, or was it before that? Or? So
my mission in education, like I started teaching, identifying more as a writer than a teacher, and then it gradually shifted. In my mission going into classrooms was using the intersection of the arts for personal and social transformation. We'd write plays, put them on stage, write poetry, put it on stage, etc. Growing up, I went to all private schools. Private Catholic grade school, private Catholic high school, Bellarmine University. And then when I began my teaching career was Oldham County, which is very rural. And then I never realized how bad racism really is until I started teaching in JCPS, and how some of my best, hardest working, kindest students would get followed in the grocery store. You know, and when I'm reading their personal stories of how they feel like their skin makes them a target, you know, that really challenged me in all kinds of ways. And then I realized that race has defined almost every area of your life, and it hasn't mine. You know, and that's when I really discovered my privilege, and I was late to the game on this. I was in my 30s, my early 30s, when I discovered that. As far as being an activist, that's when Trump got elected. That was during Trump's, you know, rise to the seat. And after he was elected, it emboldened a lot of people, even in our community. And so I had a Muslim student who was walking home, had stuff thrown at her, people threatening to take off her hijab. Students of Latinx descent with chants of build the wall around them. Kids who, are LGBTQ+, scared to tell people who they really are. And so there was this immense need of having a safe place to talk about and process things. Because at our school, we celebrated diversity.
Which is more.
We had chants like more love, less hate. Our diversity makes us great. We would spell more, M-O-O-R-E. We would actually do chants and march through the hallway. And every kid would have a sign, that really they were allowed to stand up for their personal issue and do it in a safe place. And then have these chants that unified us all just with an attitude of acceptance and that we must do better. And these kids felt safe at school. They didn't feel that safe, its walls. And so we created a safe place for them to talk, for them to write, for them to be bold, to be brave, to understand these systems of injustice they've inherited and how they can push back.
Empowering them.
But also giving them a place to discuss their trauma. Their shared collective trauma that they've all inherited and their specific traumas they've experienced. And that healing is empowering. And that healing is solidifying this group. And all of a sudden, you don't have kids, working for a grade or a worksheet or to pass or to play the game of the status quo system. You've got kids who are mission motivated, passionate, just tied to each other, and in a sense, revolutionaries. That they're wanting to change the systems they've inherited. And they're wanting everybody's best selves, authentic selves, to be welcomed. Because they just don't get how we can be racist still. They don't get how we can be homophobic still. They don't get how we're questioning climate change still.
They don't come with all the baggage.
They don't come with all the baggage. They're ahead of the curve, and they grow up, in a sense, in a global community already, because they're tapped in with their phones.
Right.
And they grow up with a global community already because in JCPS they're going to school with kids with all kinds of different cultures. So they don't fall victim to the same stereotypes and the same cultural propaganda that a lot of us fell victim to. And I'm constantly realizing how I've been propagandized without knowing it.
So many of the things you're doing with African American history, you've got a new book out, your students, United by the Alphabet series. I look at all of these things, you've got national attention for it. It's just amazing to me all that you've accomplished. And one quote that you had that I just love, the more leadership they earn, the more they learn.
Absolutely.
Explain that to me.
So I think the best teacher is life experience in many ways. So when kids are leading a movement and they're problem solving together and they're collaborating together and they're trying to create a movement together in any way, shape, or form, whether it's in a school building, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's on the street, whether it's through social media, as they are leading, they're encountering problems. They're having to figure out their way through them. They're understanding the bureaucracies they've inherited. They're being forced to synthesize all the various different skills they've learned and problem solve. And then that interdependent leadership, realizing I might be a great speaker, but I don't know how to computer program. Oh, you do. Awesome. You please do that. Oh, and you're good at creating slideshows. Please do that. Oh, you can do the music for us. Awesome. Please do that. Oh, you can build us a stage. So then all of a sudden, as they are leading, they're discovering the gaps in our society and the gaps in their movement, and they find people to plug those in. And then if there is any kind of struggle or any kind of perceived failure, that automatic reflection component. All right, we did this, we took a risk, but how can we do it better next time? Because when you are leading stuff and you are passionate about it, that mindset is always there, is we're going to do our best at all times, but our best should be evolving, and how can we do it better next time?
So that's where you do the learning. Tell me, with the social justice, because that just seems where your heart is with that, a possible school with that? Tell me a little bit about that.
So I'm wearing a shirt right now. It says Justice Now 502. And so this is something that's come together. Ashley Lamb Sinclair, a former Kentucky Teacher of the Year, brought myself and other Teachers of the Year in Kentucky together who are still teaching in JCPS. And right now, Nairi Clayton Taylor and myself are really trying to start this hub in JCPS. And we've been in dialogue with JCPS officials about it, and we expect this to launch this year. The main premise of this is an inter-school movement. So I would be in charge of the high schools. This would be like Moore, Shawnee, Central, and Iroquois. And what we would do is create an inter-school movement where we've got kids from different schools working together to address inequities, justice issues, things impacting their communities and their lives, where we create tangible results right now. And they're doing it alongside leaders in the community who are already doing that work. So it's in the vein of Aspen Challenge a little bit, where Aspen Challenge came in. It's an outside organization. They issue a challenge to teams in JCPS from high schools all across. And so a challenge maybe, like the one my students won last year, was create a movement that inspires people to bring their whole authentic selves to the places where they work and learn. And our answer to that was a children's book that fosters intergenerational dialogue. So we'd be addressing those issues that way, but also systemic reform, these larger issues. So coming together with experts in the community and understanding the systems of injustice we've inherited, these larger systems, why they are the way they are, how they kept getting reproduced, understanding that, and then what's it take to change, and empower our kids to start petitioning lawmakers to create the kind of change that our students are asking for. They all know that they can't vote yet, but they have a voice, and that voice should matter because they are inheriting these systems and they've got views.
And this moment in time with the protests and everything going on, it just seems that, you know, the synchronicity of that is just perfect.
Absolutely. Our kids have expertise to share, you know, and they've been shut out of the conversation, and that hurts us and it hurts them.
Well, because the young people will get to that and what inspires you about them in just a second. But that social justice movement that's going on now and what's happened in our own community, you made headlines when you were arrested. Your reaction to that, it garnered a lot of attention, and you ended up using it as a platform to help others.
Well, absolutely. So, like, when we were arrested, we were tear gassed, you know, we were shot with pepper bullets, rubber bullets, all of that, alongside a lot of other people. I ended up in a jail cell with about 30 other young men. That night, that jail cell turned into a classroom. And we shared our whys. Why were we out there on the street? Why were we risking our bodies, our lives, our careers? And in some cases, you know, being disowned from our families who have different views and who don't understand why we were out there. And that was solidified. It really solidified us. Like shared trauma really solidifies people. And my fiance at the time, who's now my wife, was in a jail cell, you know, down the way from me. And she was with 30 other women, and they were having those same conversations. When we were released, we stayed connected together. We're on multiple message threads. We support each other. We love each other. We lift up each other. And when journalists started calling me to ask for interviews, of course, I accepted. I am excited to speak out on these issues and offer a teacher's perspective. But I also acknowledge that, like, I got a platform and I have a responsibility to share that with people. So we brought everybody on board. And so people who have been denied platforms or haven't been asked, we're starting to see their brilliance, their creativity, their experiences are starting to get the spotlight, coming out of the shadows into the spotlight. And I feel like that's so important. I mean, part of the Black Lives Matter movement is just asking to matter. And so that also means, like, listening to their voices, you know, and welcoming them to the table and enlarging our table.
Right.
So it's not just the typical status quo power, it's also to realize, look, our history isn't the greatest in the world. Our country's been founded on genocide and slavery. So we have a responsibility to look at that and to acknowledge, like, the effects of slavery are still here. The civil rights movement, we're still fighting it. And so to give voice to those people who have been out there fighting every day for this just by living and being successful and giving them that platform. Because those people I was locked up with, there's welders, there's nurses, there's other educators, There's engineers. There's people studying to be marine biologists. But so many folks will be quick to label them as a thug and a criminal because they're black.
And mobs, the words that we always hear, mob.
I did hear Rand Paul call protesters mobs in D.C.
Those are the two words that we keep hearing.
And so I don't see a mob. I see an organized group. You know, what's the quote? Never doubt that a small group of citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. What's happening in Justice Square in so many ways is beautiful because people are coming in, offering the leadership they have, whether that's cooking, whether that's organizing, whether that's doing art, whether that's trying to raise funds for people, whether it's to plant a vision for what's possible, whether it's to change laws like the no knocks. People are coming together. People who are working full time, who've got kids, who've got all their own issues, and are making immense sacrifices for a cause greater than themselves. To me, that's what being a patriot is if we really love this country, we have to love the people of this country. And as long as we are locking up people for nonviolent offenses, that's not showing a whole lot of love. As long as we're denying them health care, that's not a whole lot of love. We're in multiple pandemics right now. Coronavirus, racism, and then I would argue a pandemic of apathy. That too many people are comfortable with the status quo, and we have to care. We have to care more about our bubble. We have to care about folks who live different lives than us. And we have a bit of an empathy crisis. So I think dialogue can change things, and that's important. But we have to realize if we're in a comfortable position, it's our obligation to start seeking out those voices, listening to those voices, and realizing by me being comfortable in the status quo, whether that's as a teacher, as a doctor, as an architect, as whatever, am I supporting a racist system? Because as long as I'm happy with it and somebody else is suffering, I'm a racist. Until I start to fight that system so it really helps us live up to those values of liberty and justice to all that we have kids pledge to every morning, I don't feel like I'm doing my part. So I got too much privilege and too much platform not to use it. And really, out on those streets, on those protests, I was never at risk. I want to be really clear with that. It was those black individuals, those black men and women, those black boys and girls, those black middle school students I saw out there who were at risk.
Were with one student, right? A former student of yours when you were arrested.
So a former student of mine, yes, Ariana Tule, who's one of our best friends. I guess I can say this on camera. She's going to be the godmother. She is the godmother of our soon-to-be child.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So she's more than a student. She's family.
Right.
You know, and every student's family in a sense. But she was out there, and we didn't want her to be alone. So we walked in solidarity with her, you know, and we were chanting Breonna Taylor's name. We were chanting no justice, no peace. And all that means is like, look, while this violence is being done to people, we are not going to be quiet about it. You know, until we rectify these violent systems of injustice, we have an obligation to speak out. And we need more people doing this.
Did you ever worry about JCPS? Did you ever worry that this will come back on you? And did you consider it and just said, it's my moral obligation, it doesn't matter? Did you have that conversation with yourself?
I think fear makes us very small, and fear makes us very paranoid. And I try not to entertain those thoughts. When you see kids out there and when you see kids and other people risking their lives, and I'm a teacher in a very diverse school, in a very diverse district, I don't see a separation. Like, I don't see me being a teacher in a classroom and that's it, that's my job, and the rest of society, you do your thing. No, I fight for my kids in a classroom, and I fight for my kids on the streets. I will fight for them in any legal way I can. I'll fight for them in the news. I will use every platform and sphere of influence to make our country live up to its values of liberty and justice for all. I think we owe it to our kids. That if we're just in our classrooms doing our thing and that's it, then we're not doing our part.
And they smell a fake, right? I mean, kids do more than anybody with that, and they know who cares, don't you think?
I think so, you know, and I think our democracy only works for us if we work for it. And voting is just one mechanism to change things. But we also know through redlining, through making it harder to vote, that tool's being taken away from people. So what tools do we have? Marching is one tool. Every march that I've been in has been peaceful. People looking out for each other, offering water to each other, offering food to each other, offering fellowship to each other. And the only violence I've seen is from police shooting at us, tear gassing us, and basically escalating the situation. I wish those resources that we put into police would instead be used to address root causes of poverty, root causes that make people so desperate where they're willing to break the law to take care of their family.
Let me go back to the kids, because that's the one thing. I only have a couple more questions for you, just about your inspiration and where you see hope. Is that with the young people?
Absolutely. Like I tell my kids, and even this week, this generation gives me so much hope because they are ready for these conversations, and they are ready to dialogue, and they are fired up, and they are thirsting for meaningful, relevant work that empowers them to be the leaders in the world and to learn through that mechanism. They're frustrated. They're frustrated with their choices for president. A lot of them feel like it's so important to vote, but the options are so limited. And so a big part of me running for office a few years ago was even showing them that, look, anybody can run for office. We went in knowing nothing, and we learned along the way, and you can do the same thing too. Ariana Toole, who we did get locked up with, and who was the last person to get released. She was in there for 2 nights. Police refused to call her by her actual name. They got her name wrong on her paperwork. After she tried to correct them, they wouldn't correct it, and instead they called her Arena 2K all night, instead of by her actual name. There were so many ways they just dehumanized and tried to break us. But you can't block out that much light that we had. We started sharing our whys. No amount of darkness will black out that light. And we realized that we're on the right side of history. And so these students that I see right now who don't understand, because in my classroom, I've got students from immigrant families. Students from immigrant families who have family members who have been deported, who have been in cages. I've got students who've lost people they love to gun violence, who've been locked up for crimes they haven't committed. There's a lot of, every blessing, every challenge in our community comes through our classroom doors. And so the ability for them to dialogue, again, with the intent to understand each other and not win an argument is so inspiring. They're not trying to misrepresent somebody and then attack a misrepresentation like we so often see in our politics. Instead, they're committed to the truth, what's really going on and what is really just. And if our conversations in Washington, D.C. and Frankfurt were as mature as that, we'd be in a lot better shape right now.
Final question to you. How have you changed as a teacher over the past few years?
I think the biggest change is just coming to JCPS. There's several shifts, because as a teacher, you're always evolving, because society is always changing, and you have to change with the times, and you have to meet every kid where they're at, wherever they are, emotionally, physically, spiritually, intellectually, wherever they're at, you have to meet them, and your obligation is to link arms with them and to march forward to a better life, march forward to a way where you're more empowered to create your fate. But coming to JCPS and just realizing how bad systemic racism is impacting our kids. That was a major wake-up call for me. I did not realize it. I was safe in my white bubble, my white middle-class bubble. I was safe, and I didn't realize. And the effect was pretty immediate, because this wasn't just something on the news. This wasn't an article I read. These were students I loved and cared about. And because I had a relationship with them, I cared deeply, because what happened to them also happened to me. The next phase was realizing that there are these gross inequities coming on down. This massive umbrella of political injustice coming on down that is affecting everything we do. And no matter how good I am in the classroom or how good they are in the classroom or other teachers, what we try to do if we have oppressive policies coming down, our students are inheriting a world that is not fit for them, a world that doesn't see them as human, a world that's just looking to capitalize off them. And so that's why I decided to run for office and learn how our system works. And when I came to that realization, our democracy will only work for us if we work for it. And there's lots of people working for it who don't have our best interest at heart. So it's so important for us to address the civic empowerment gap and to empower everybody to be more civically active. So I went into that race, getting an education, I got one, and when I came back, I had more tools and more knowledge, more wisdom, more connections to address that civic empowerment gap and prepare my students to be possible future legislators. This summer was one of the most educational summers I've ever experienced. Being in jail was an educational experience. I did not realize how brutal our policing is here in Louisville. I didn't realize it until I linked arms with Black Lives Matter and my students out there. And I got shot, and I got tear gassed right next to Attica Scott, right next to Attica Drake, right next to my past student Ariana Tule. And in jail and just being denied our humanity, where they just wanted us to suffer and belittle us. And also going in jail in the middle of a pandemic and police officers not wearing masks and not social distancing and cramming us together in a cell of 30 in a very unclean, unsanitary cell, and putting us at risk, putting our families at risk, and everybody we come into contact with. And that's when I realized through your negligence, you're unleashing biological terrorism on us. How dare you? How dare you? Protect and serve, not scapegoat and terrorize. How dare you? And so I go into this school year realizing, again, these systems that our students are up against, teachers afraid to speak out and to empower our kids to be more anti-racist and dismantle these systems because supposedly the status quo keeps you safe. And I'm going out there with eyes wide open, a line drawn in the sand. And that line drawn in the sand is basically, we are all in this together. Black Lives Matter. We welcome immigrants. You're in my classroom. You are sacred. Your learning is sacred. I am sorry for any trauma we have done to you. Climate change is real. We have to look at this. We need to be realizing that, like, being a patriot means fighting for your country in all kinds of ways. And that means for it to be more honest. And so our kids see that. And I just feel, having personally been traumatized by this system, I have a little more understanding of what our kids face every single day.